Welcome back to the Resolute Man Show. I have Skip Hall here. I'm in his studio today. It's good to have you on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, so amazing. I mean, you're a local to where I live. You were 6 years coaching for Boise State football.
Correct, yeah.
And you've got this incredible book, Coach 'Em Up, the Skip Hall story, 3-time Hall of Fame recipient, and so much to this. But today, I think we're going to be talking about influence and the power of that and how it encourages people.
Yeah, influence and encouragement, two very vital things, especially in our culture today.
They are.
Yeah.
You know what's fascinating about you? We share something in common, is that you didn't really have a father figure growing up.
No.
And you became this mentor to so many young adults. I mean, just an incredible, over 30 years of coaching college football.
Right.
And so how does that happen?
Well, I think number one is that I decided that when I grew up, got married, had children, that I didn't want to be like my dad was or even a stepdad was. But I think you just, the coaches were my dads. So I didn't have a dad in the home to speak of for very long. But the coaches that I played for became my dads, and I learned so much from them through their influence, through their encouragement, and in the long run, that was kind of the title I wanted to give the book, is Coach 'Em Up. And there's a story that goes along with that. Real quickly, I'll share that. But when I left Boise State and went to the University of Missouri, I was there about 3 weeks. And this young man came to the door and he said, "Coach Hall, can I speak with you for a minute?" And I said, "Sure, come on in." He sat down and he began to tell me this story. He said, "You won't remember this probably," and I didn't, but he was a walk-on player at the University of Washington, and I was a coach 10 years prior. And he said one day at practice, he was really messing up. He was stumbling and bumbling and fumbling, and I heard the ruckus going on because the young coach that was working with him was yelling at him, screaming at him, swearing at him. And this young man said, I walked over, got between the two of them, and said 5 words that changed his whole perspective on things.
What was it?
Coach 'em up, not down. Coach 'em up, not down. In other words, people need encouragement. They need to be built up, not degraded or put down. And so that became my mantra, so to speak, is coach 'em up. Coach 'em up. Coach people up. Sure, that's true in football, but it's true in life. It's true in the family.
Yeah.
It's true in business.
People need encouragement. They're hard on themselves. I mean, people are naturally hard on themselves. There's a lot of self-doubt today. There's a lot of attacks on the mindset of people in culture and in the world.
Yeah.
And so people need mentors to help them upward.
No question about that. Mentors are so valuable, and their influence and their encouragement is what you learn from as a younger person, and hopefully later on you can carry that into your own home and with your own children, and if you're in the coaching field, well, obviously you're dealing with a lot of young people, and so that's the key. How did
it happen? I want to take a step back. I mean, you're playing college football,
right? And
how did you become this incredible coach for so many years?
Well, I think the key there is I was with good people. You want to surround yourself with good character people. People always ask me, well, what's the number one thing in coaching or recruiting or dealing with people? And the answer is character. Character. Personality is one thing. That's kind of your temperament.
Yeah.
But character is who you are. It's your ethical behaviors, your ethical and moral beliefs. That's who you are, and I think that's much needed today in our society.
Well, a lot of people listening have businesses, they have employees and things like that. Some of them might be coaches in sports. And, how do you test for character? Like when you're recruiting, when you're trying to find the right people for your team,
right?
Were there any ways you would, make sure they had the right character?
Well, it takes a lot of investigation, a lot of research.
Yeah.
And so I always dove in deep. In other words, I would talk to their coaches, the principal, people that were around them, people that knew them, and you get a sense pretty quickly of who they are and what they're all about. And then in just talking with them and letting them share their belief system and what they're interested in and what's important to them. And, pretty soon you can kind of get a good picture of their character.
What aspect of character it really sticks out? What are you really looking for when you think of the word character? Because, a lot of people probably have different definitions of that. What are you looking for?
Well, again, it's ethical and moral values.
Okay.
Ethical and moral values, because without those, you're like a fish in the ocean. You've got to have some belief system. You've got to have something that you can cling to and say, this is who I am, this is what I believe, and I'm sticking to it. Unwavering, sticking to it.
I love that. So you, without a father, how did you make sure that didn't become an excuse in your life? Because that can happen, even subconsciously to people. It's like, well, I was never taught how to be a good dad, or I was never taught how to be a good leader. I've never been given that title. I didn't see good leadership exemplified in my home or around me. And people sometimes subconsciously just kind of embrace that excuse in their own life for their own inadequacies. None of us are perfect. We're on a journey of learning.
Right.
But obviously you must have just not embraced any of those excuses to be able to move forward so powerfully in influence and doing something as big as you did.
Yeah. Well, sports became the vehicle, and coaches became my dads. Mm-hmm. And I learned so much from my coaches, all the way from a little guy in Little League all the way up through college, played college football, and we actually won a national championship at a Division II school in Minnesota. But, you learn so much from people like that. Just watching them, being around them, listening to them, you're like a sponge. You're just, soaking it all up. And I knew that when I couldn't play anymore, when they took the ball away, I knew I was going to put the whistle on because I wanted to coach. I wanted to have a chance to be an influence in the lives of young people like my coaches had been for me.
That's so good. So what do you say to people looking for those mentors? Sometimes they're hard to come by.
Choose wisely. Associate with those people that are going to bring some positiveness to your life, going to be an encourager and not somebody that's going to belittle you or threaten you or whatever. But choose wisely, and you'll know who those people are when you're around them.
I've always said take very few opinions, but definitely take the right few.
Yes,
and you got to find those right people that aren't just going to, look at their own experiences and project that on you. While that can be helpful sometimes, but they're looking at the uniqueness of who you are, where you're at, and what you need to use your words to coach them up.
Right.
I would say encourage them in the direction that God's calling them to go in.
Right.
And I think that's so important. We do need, I think so many men are running the race alone. Yeah, they might have some friends and things like that, but they're not getting deep, real enough at a deep level, and they don't have those older people around them to really guide them and to share their insecurities, to share their doubts, to share their struggles, to share ask for wisdom about the big decisions and these kinds of things. And I'm telling you, if you don't have those people, you're not going to run the race as well.
Yeah.
It's essential. So definitely be careful not to take a lot of opinions, but definitely take the right ones.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been said, I can't remember who said it, but most men live a life of quiet desperation.
Thoreau.
And it was Thoreau, okay? And I think that is so true. And yet we need relationships. We need other men in our lives. Obviously, men's groups, Bible studies. We need other men in our lives to bounce things off of and
Absolutely. I often talk about, Resolute Man. Resolute is admirably purposeful and unwavering.
Right.
The definition. And I think in a biblical sense, it's to stand for truth, it's to lead unapologetically for what's right and to love others well. And I think that that's so important today. And we as men must rise up and stand in the gap for other people. So it's our own families, yes, but it's also people maybe at work, or it's people in our community, because there's a void right now of good biblical masculinity. And I think that you've been an example, and your book I'm sure talks about this, of being a good leader, being the kind of leader that we want to embrace. And so I think that's super important. So let's talk about encouragement again for a second.
Sure.
Sometimes the most encouraging thing you can do, I think, is to tell people the truth they don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And so how do you do that in a way that still uplifts?
There's a saying that I like to use is, you need to give people the injection without feeling the needle. In other words, there's a way to speak into the lives of people in love without feeling the needle. And I think that is very, very important.
And I'm sure that you would use stories and find some way. It's always unique, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I use stories all the time. I use stories in my coaching with my players. I use stories and examples. But yeah, stories are so powerful. I mean, look at the Bible. Look at Jesus. Look at all the stories that he told. And yeah, powerful stuff.
So how did you, I'm thinking of the dad out there. Sometimes you're just like working hard, you're coming home, and there's issues at home, and one of the kids needs encouragement. The wife needs encouragement. How, maybe a story's not coming to their mind. How did you fill your mind, or how did you come up with stories and make sure you had good stories? I want to pause from the episode just for a minute and share with you a couple important things. First of all, make sure you get that Resolute Manifesto at resoluteman.com. Test your masculinity against those 8 principles there. It's a free download, completely free, and you're going to get tips from me in email that you'll find valuable. Okay, so make sure you go do that. Also, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to lead, to be an initiator and lead your family in your marriage in taking the parenting mentor program. It is literally revolutionary for building the right godly legacy and really testing your parenting against it. And you're going to learn a ton. You're going to come away with it with a really battle-tested plan to launch confident Christian kids in these unprecedented times that stand firm and walk strong with the Lord. You can't save your kids, but there's a lot you can do. You're the God-authorized influencers. You're the dad. You're the pastor of your family. So I highly encourage you to check that out at becourageousministry.org. And if your heart's leaning this direction, you're really loving the ministry, you feel led to give, you could donate at becourageousministry.org. It would make a massive difference, even a small amount, mid amount, or even a large amount, whatever the Lord's prompting you. If that's the case, man, thank you. That really helps us to be able to focus and put all this free content out and help as many people as possible. This year, our goal is to have double impact. So thank you so much for listening. Let's get back to the show.
Well, I guess just by living life long enough,
yeah,
you come up with a lot of stories, but I think a priority system is really important too. We need to place the Lord number one and our family number two, and then whatever it is we do as an occupation, I mean that's third, and obviously we can't let that become number one. We've got to keep things in proper priority and perspective, and so when we're at home or we're with the wife and the kids, we need to show them that they are the most important thing other than God.
And not flipping through our phones, not distracted, but focused. And so many people let their ambition sacrifice their most important mission.
Right.
And so it's so important that we're there for them. Absolutely. So you're a Christian, you're a believer. When did the Lord get a hold of you?
It actually happened in 1978. We had just gone to the University of Washington, and we went to the Rose Bowl our third year while we were there.
Yeah.
I'd been a two-timer as far as church goes, Christmas and Easter.
Oh, a two-timer. I haven't heard that. Okay.
But never had made a commitment. And we came back from the Rose Bowl at the University of Washington, and the whole city was really fired up and just telling us what great coaches we were and what a great year it was and putting us up on this pedestal. And, I was kind of lapping it up. And then my wife, about 3 days after that, she said, Skip, when you stand before the Lord on Judgment Day, he's not going to ask you how many Rose Bowls you won. He's not going to ask you how many championships you won. He's not going to ask you how many players you've sent into the NFL. What he is going to ask you, however, is what kind of a relationship have you had with him and with me, your wife, and what have you taught your children in the family? Well, that struck me just like a 200-pound linebacker blindsided me. And that really turned me on and started my spiritual journey really cranked up. And I started reading the Bible. I started listening to this guy on the radio. And it seemed like he was talking to me every day. His name's Chuck Swindoll.
Oh, yeah.
And he's become a great friend of mine.
Really?
Yeah, since 1979.
Wow.
And he's played a big part. My wife played a big part. And there was a player that I coached at the University of Washington that I coached him, and he ministered to me. And so it was a partner, a player, and a pastor that played an influential role in my becoming a believer.
That's amazing. So I like that you gave some steps there for people, because you were a Christian and you go to church 2 times, but it wasn't the center of your life.
No.
Jesus wasn't the center of your life. And that played out probably in challenges around you.
Absolutely.
And so, but then you woke up, and I love that, your wife.
Yeah.
Power of a good wife.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they are incredible.
Absolutely.
I have a strong woman.
Yeah.
You met her?
Yeah, I do. I do remember that she's a dandy.
Yeah, and you do too. Just knowing that story, I'm like, okay, married well.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredible. But then you took action. You didn't just think about it.
Right.
You started reading the infallible Word of God.
Yeah.
And that is so good. And then started to listen to pastors on the radio, and probably started going to church too.
Oh yeah, very much so. And then this player, like I say, he ministered to me all the time. Always encouraging me and building me up and talking about the Lord and his experiences and so on and so forth. And he actually became the state director for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And I became chairman of the board for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Really?
In the Seattle area, yeah.
That's amazing.
And we started FCA here in Idaho, too.
Wow.
When I became coach 1987 or 88. We started. They had no FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, here in Idaho.
Yeah.
We started that, and it has grown and grown, and now it's thriving. A lot of huddles going on in the high schools and junior high schools, and yeah, it's good.
So look what God did through you once you fully surrendered to Him.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes there's people that there's one thing in their life they still are not willing to give up. It's some area of sin,
right,
or some challenge. They're just like, no, I'm not going to give God control of this. And that impacts their whole walk with the Lord, and in not surrendering that. And so I think it's so cool that you fully surrendered.
Yeah.
It makes all the difference.
He put me to work.
That's so good.
But we need to be, the most important ability in the world is availability. And he gave me things that he wanted me to do and be a part of. But yes, after I surrendered and said, Lord, I'm yours. How do you want to use me? Where do you want to use me? And the rest.
And then it appears in front of you, and sometimes it's what you were hoping for, and sometimes it's something even better.
Yeah.
It's something different that God has in store for you that you would never know about unless you surrendered. Okay, so there's a lot of coaches out there that are not surrendered to the Lord. Okay? And some are successful, some are not so much.
Right.
But I believe in my business life, I've experienced supernatural wisdom. I've gotten insights on actions to take that looked counterintuitive to what's normal, but was so much better after the fact. And I just felt like a prompting from the Lord that I need to do this versus that, and these kinds of things. How has your faith in God, how has God helped you to be a better coach and given you that supernatural strength or wisdom?
When I had turned my life over to the Lord and we started doing things together, instead of me trying to do them all myself, why, we were a good team. and to have him on your team is the best teammate in the world for sure. And I think it's, you kind of turn your priority system, get that in place, you get your priorities in place, then you start looking at, where do you feel led to be a part of? What do you feel led to do? There's always something in God's ministry that he can use anybody to do something.
That's good. That's a really good way to think about it. Teaming up with God. God, Jesus is your leader.
Yeah.
And so so then you're more effective if we all need a leader if we're going to lead others.
Right.
And that's the ultimate leader.
Yeah.
Right there. So you had your player that was helping you, you're running the race together.
Right.
You had your pastor.
Right.
You had your friend on the radio that became a friend. And you had your wife holding you accountable and pushing you forward.
Yeah.
And all of that, us men need all of that. We need to get off the sidelines and really be a strong team with God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then we can do incredible things together.
No kidding.
Incredible things. So, you have this really cool book, Coach 'em Up, the Skip Hall story, the power of influence and encouragement changes lives, right here. And he's a 3-time Hall of Fame recipient, 7-time College Bowl champion. So good right here. What was the inspiration to write the book? And then what will people get out of the book?
Well, the inspiration, of course, was my own experience. The book is about my story. It's all about from a boy all the way up through all the coaching positions that I had and even into the business world, which I was part of for a number of years. And then there's some things in the back that some coaching principles that I think are really good that people can get out of it for coaches, for business leaders, anybody that's a leader. Really good principles about leadership and coaching, but it's my story, and I tried to relate it so that people could grab a hold of it and say, that's maybe a pretty good idea. Maybe I'll to check into that, or my spiritual journey is all in there. So it's all there. And then Nick Saban, who I coached, who's the coach at Alabama, who I coached at Kent State University, wrote the foreword to the book. And he and I had coached together for a few years. And so it all kind of came together. And I'm just real pleased with it. I'm very thankful. A great team helped put this together. Aloha Publishing, right out of Eagle, Idaho, right here.
Oh, wow.
And but they did a remarkable job. My co-author, Heather Getter, I would talk and share, and she would tape record, and then she would take that and then put it into print and come up with the storylines and fill in the blanks. And so, it was a great team effort.
That's great. And they can buy that wherever books
Amazon.
are sold.
Amazon primarily. They've got a good deal on it right now on Amazon. Coach 'em Up, again, the Skip Hall story. And a lot of people, they have said this book should be in every home in America.
Well, I'm excited to read it. I appreciate the gift today.
Absolutely.
And so I have a couple more questions for you. Is there a moment in your coaching career that was like that in football?
Yeah.
That was just like that memorable, epic moment for you as a coach?
Well, as far as football is concerned, our first Rose Bowl, 1978, we were heavy underdogs and played and beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl. That was an epic turning point in our coaching career.
Wow.
And then the Orange Bowl in 1985, where we beat Oklahoma, and we were both ranked in the top 3 or 4, and we missed out on the national championship by just a few votes. But, those are the 2 games that really vividly stick out. But the story that sticks out the most is the story about Coach 'em Up. Coach 'em up, not down. And that young man is a pastor today in Missouri.
Wow.
And he shared that story. I told this story to Chuck Swindoll. We were on a cruise one time, and he and I were sitting up on the deck drinking coffee, and he asked me some questions, and this story came out. And every Father's Day, around Father's Day now on the radio, he shares that story about fathers need to coach 'em up. And he talks about how you carve the initials on a young tree, but as the tree grows, what happens? Those initials get bigger and deeper, and that's what it's like, too, as far as the influence and encouragement that a father can give to his children. Yeah.
Well, just sitting here, I just feel like in the presence of just greatness, and that's God through you.
Well,
I know that's true.
It's not me. He's done a work in me, and as he can do in anybody, doesn't matter who you are, where you've been, what you've done.
Absolutely.
He can do a work in any of us, and
Amen.
we just need to turn it over to him. Stop trying to, we want to grab the doorknob and try to do everything ourselves, but we need to turn it over and let him do his work through us.
Amen. Amen. Well, I ask everybody on the show, at the end of the show, tell me a time you rejected passivity as a man, that temptation to do just good enough and not do what's best, to be passive in either your family or in work or some situation. But instead of doing the passive thing, you rejected that passivity and it made a big difference.
Well, that would be when I became a Christian, because I had all this ego in me that said, I want to be the next great coach. I want to be the next head coach, and I want to build a tremendous program. And it was mostly focused on that and not on my family, not on God for sure. Mm-hmm. But that was rejected when I became a Christian. The Lord took the number one spot, the family took the number two spot, and the coaching dropped down. And I think that's when everything got better. I was a better husband, a better father, a better coach. Everything got better.
So good, so good.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so fun. Great to get to know you, and I appreciate being on the show.
Well, my pleasure. I just might mention in closing, too, that I've got a radio show called Game Plan for Life that's on every Saturday morning at 10 on KBXL 94.1. You and your wife are on there, and people can go and get a podcast of you guys, the show that we did together. Last week, in fact. And I'd encourage people to seek that out. And then if you're interested in listening week by week or going back through the podcasts, there's about six or 7 years of really good podcasts, including my interview with Chuck Swindoll.
Oh, I'm going to check that one out.
Yeah, check.
And so
it's for men. It's about men.
I love that.
Yeah.
Chuck Swindoll, what a guy.
Yeah.
And is this on all the podcast players too?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So go wherever you're at, Google, Apple, Spotify.
Game Plan for Life with Skip Hall.
I'm going to go hit subscribe myself on the podcast to your show. So,
okay.
So great. Anything else you want to mention? Last words?
No, sir, but I just want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference in the lives of people, and there's nothing greater than that.
Oh, thank you so much for the encouragement.
You bet.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody.